G'day guys, how's it going? So in this video, we're going to talk about tuple structs in Rust. So up to this point, what we've seen are named structs, where we give the struct a name, and then all the fields have names and things like that, right? But a tuple struct is similar to what we've seen already with tuples. It looks like a tuple and almost acts like a tuple, but it's not quite a tuple. So let's go through a use case. So say, for example, I want a struct and I want to call it color, right? Now, a color is usually made up of a red, blue, and green type thing. So you might go something like red, let's set this to an I32, or even more so, a U8. Then you'll have a blue, and that will be a U8. And in between that, we have a green as well, which is a U8. Cool. So this is a color struct, and then you would come down here and you say, okay, I want to, create, say, a green color. So you do that by going color, and then you'd set red to 0. You would set green to 255, and blue would also be 0, right? If you wanted a green color. Cool. So that's how you would do it with what we know so far about structs. But really, when we think about it, generally, when we think about colors in terms of other programs like Photoshop and all those other things, we usually refer to it as RGB, right, in order. So you would normally see something like this, say, and I'll just implement this as CSS. You would see RGB, and then it'd be 0, 255, and 0, right? That's the format you would normally see. So because of this, this is where tuple structs come into the picture. So if I wanted to rewrite this structure or this struct to use a tuple, it'd be pretty simple. All we have to do is say, I want a struct where I want 3 values inside of parentheses. So I'm going to have 3 lots of U8, right? And that's how you would define a struct with 3 parameters. And then down here, instead of having the curly brace and defining them by name, I can now come here and go 0, 255, and 0. Cool? And that is essentially how we could create a tuple struct. Now, in terms of accessing the portions inside the tuple struct, it's the same as a tuple. So if I want to go let red portion equal green dot 0, you do that. Or if I wanted to grab each bit, so we grab the green portion of green, that would be green dot 1, and then we'd have, not green dot 3, dot 2 for the blue portion, right? And then I can print this out. So we can go print line, and I could say red portion, and we'll go green portion and blue portion, right? And what I'll do is I'll do something like this, where I show each bit like that, right? And I've got the exclamation mark. So if I run this, this is just going to give us the RGB of what I've done up here, right? So there's 0, 255, 0. Cool. Now, that all looks very tuple-like, doesn't it? Right? And in fact, if I was to come in and say, I want to implement, I don't know, orange. So let's do orange. I could easily just go 0, 255. Oh, sorry. 0. We'll go 255, 220, and 0. Right? It's probably not technically an orange, but you get my point. We do the same thing as we've done here. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll just get rid of this for a second. And we'll just copy things. So let me copy this. And we'll just rename it to orange.0, orange and orange. And then basically, you would just print out the same thing down here. I don't even need that line. Cool. And if I and we'll just comment out the struct up here for a second. So if I run this, we're going to get the same thing, right? So you might be asking, well, where's the benefit here, right? Why would I do this? Well, let's say we'll take this print line, and I want to create a function that prints out the RGB values, just like we've got here, right? So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to create a function, and let's say I'm going to go print, and we're going to pass in, say, we'll call it a palette in this situation. And as the type, I have to then specify a tuple, right? Of well, in this case, it's I32, I32, and I32, because I didn't specify the type here, which I probably should. So let's just do that to be accurate, actually. U8, U8, and U8, which means now this needs to be U8, U8, U8. So we're going to create something with 3 tuple values, right? And it doesn't matter what that tuple is. It could be anything. And I'll explain in a minute what I mean by that. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to literally do this. And I might even rename this to print palette, just to point out something in a second. All right. So we do all this. And then instead of having that line, we decide to now go print palette. And what I'm going to do is go palette. I'm going to go orange. All right, and I'm going to actually comment out these lines. I'll just delete them now. All right, and I'm going to rename this to palette, palette, palette. And if I run this, we're going to get the same thing. All right, and you go, okay, what's the problem with this? Well, firstly, we have a function where we're passing tuples around, which, let's be honest, it's not the most clean thing to do, right? Because we don't know what those 3 things necessarily mean until we have to write the code here to specify otherwise. But the more important thing here is if I decide now, instead of using a color, all right, let's say I'm going to set a 3-dimensional point or a three-dimensional position, all right? So that could also be U8, U8, and U8. Whoops. And this could be equal to, I don't know, 0, 0, 0. Now, this is not a color. This is now basically X, Y, and Z on a 3D plane. All right? But I can pass this in. Why? Well, because we're only expecting a tuple of 3 U8s, right? So if I run this, it's going to go 0, 0, 0, but this isn't a color, right? And that's where this tuple struct comes into picture. Because if I now come back to the approach of saying, okay, I'm going to change this to a color of U8, U8, U8. So instead of expecting just a tuple, when I save this, what's happened here? I don't need the U8, U8, U8 bit. I just need color. All right. Now this is going to fail because this is not a color of U8, U8, U8. It's just a tuple of U8, U8, U8. All right. So what we need to do now is, even if I choose orange here, right? Let's just go with the right example. If I pass in orange, even though technically it's the color, it's still not going to work because once again, it's just a tuple, but we're expecting a color type. So what we can do now is we can do this, pass in green, and now we're guaranteed that whatever gets passed into here will be a type of color, right? Because we're using a tuple color struct. And there we go. It will actually compile and run. And it just gives us a little bit more restriction and prevents us from doing things we do not want to do, right? So that's the main reason why we do this, okay? Now, just to be complete, we can still use something. We can use Destructuring. So we can see here I've defined 3 individual variables line by line here. Well, we don't need to do this. We can do what we used to do with tuples. And we can go red, green portion, and blue portion is equal to palette. Right? And that basically means the 2 lines below can go away. And what's happened here? Oh, sorry. When you destructure using a struct, this is a tuple destructuring. In order to destructure a struct or a tuple struct, you need to specify the type at the front. And now it will allow me to destructure it. That's the bit I was forgetting. So that's another thing to understand. So now you can see that we've cleaned that code up a bit. We know that we've got 3 values like we would with the tuple, and bang, Bob's your uncle, and you still get the 3 values. So you might be asking, when should I use a tuple then? I would argue that there's never a use case for it. I'm still waiting on a situation where I need to use a tuple. I would prefer to use something that's named so I can understand exactly what I'm working with inside the function that is using it, right? So I like this idea. I like this idea that I've got a color palette that I'm passing in. Poly palette's not the right word. It's just it's actually just a color if we think about it. But you get my point. It's probably not a palette, so I probably should say print color. Right? I'm just being politically correct here, but you get the point, right? So this is 90% of the time what I do when I want to create something that utilizes a struct with this type of syntax, right? Most of the time I'll use named structs anyway, but sometimes it does make sense to do it in this fashion. And color is one of them. Another one is coordinates or point, what we would refer to as a point, right? So I can come up here, go struct, point, U8, U8, U8. And even though it has the same parameters, what you'll see in a second is if I go let origin equal point and go 0, 0, 0, I still can't pass that in down here because it's not a type of color, it's a type of point. But yeah, they're probably the couple of times where I would use a tuple struct is when you've got, something that you're used to having a certain format, like a point or a color or something of that nature. Now, just to be complete, you could have a function on the outside here where you print out the color. But like we saw in the previous video, it's probably better if we create a method on the color, and you can still do that with tuple structs. So we can still come in here and go implementation, color, like this. I believe you don't need the parameters. You just need the name. And then in here, we can pretty much just go print and take this code, right? And I'll just change the color, and we'll change this to, was it at self, and we need the fn at the front. And I'll remove this. And now this becomes self. And now that works. And then all I have to do down here is go green.print. And this should get you the same result. And I'll just delete point here because I don't need it anymore. So if I run this, there we go. We get exactly the same result. But now we're using a tuple struct with a method on it. Cool. And that's where I'm going to finish this video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.